Thank you so much for joining me here, Jillian, in the Embrace group. I really have just been drawn to all the little comments that you've made in the group, and I feel like you're representing a woman who's, been married for a very long time and has built up some experience and wisdom. So I just thought it'd be nice to tap into some of that. So I was wondering if you could start by just sharing a little bit about yourself and your relationship with us.
Sure. So I have been married for 25 years. I can't believe that because it's gone by like that. We have 3 teenagers right now, all 2 years apart. I live on the South Shore of Boston. Do you want to know a little bit about what I used to do for work and things like that, maybe, too, just to get a sense of who I am? So I was an oncology massage therapist for years, and I specialized in pediatric care. And I would consider myself pretty spiritual, and that job really enabled me to do that. So I really was living my walk and all that good stuff. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So 25 years is a long time, as you say, and 3 kids, 2 years apart. Phew. Yeah. And working. I imagine there's been some challenges over the years.
Yeah, it's interesting. Beg your pardon. I was thinking a little bit about this, and to go back again to the last episode that you did on your podcast, you talked a little bit about some of the fairy tales that we come to marriages with, and I definitely had a fairy tale that I walked in with. I walked in thinking that, okay, I'm going to be an open book, and I'm going to want these things, and he's going to want those things for me, and everything's going to go great. But you know what? That's not where the lessons are, right? Wow, what a boring marriage that would be. So, yeah, I would say that for me has been one of the things is learning how to get what I want in a way that speaks to who he is. I've married a man who's very different than I am. He is a black and white thinker, and I'm kind of creative, and I'm very heart-based, and he's, intellectual based, and we're fabulous parenting partners together because of that. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when you're not speaking the same language, that can be a little challenging. So,
just a little, yeah.
Well, that has definitely been one of the challenges that, we've had to bridge. And he definitely was a person that had thought that sorry was not an important word. And again, when I heard the woman speak on your podcast, and I can't remember her name.
See again.
She said, I'm a proud woman, and I always thought it was the other person's fault. I thought, I know that person. I'm married to that person. And, I think some of what's happened is just constantly requesting what you want, whether it's loudly or quietly, and holding space for that person to get it. They may not get it right away, but holding space that eventually they will.
I love that you mentioned that, because I feel like the fairy tale is they just will get it immediately. In fact, they should get it before we even have to ask for it. That's the fairy tale. Well, that's the one I've been kind of having to unravel myself from. And I love that you're saying you have to ask for it, be really clear about it, but also hold the space while they come to terms with the idea of it.
Right. Well, it's so interesting because, they're completely different people. Anyone that you are in relationship with is a completely different person with a completely different filter that was built out of completely different circumstances, potentially in their childhood and other experiences that they've had. Yes. And so, I laugh because we read this whole poem about standing as two strong trees and our branches meeting when we were getting married. And I think we've only sort of kind of closely gotten to that point now, 25 years. Yeah. And I think that, I think sometimes in marriage, what's so important is to realize that some of those rough patches, they're not the end game. They're actually the creative game. They're actually the place where all that energy of learning each other and surrendering to what the other needs and reconnecting to one another, that's where it's happening, is in that space. And I think we can get really caught up in wanting to be understood and getting our way, and yet sometimes allowing that is the way. That is the way.
I've got a question. So I get, from all your comments and whatever connection I've had with you, your spiritual essence, I can really sense it and feel it. I'm wondering, did you walk into this marriage as a spiritual person, or has that been an evolution? And what part is the marriage, because I feel like my marriage is my spiritual teacher. I'm just wondering what part that's played for you.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I think that every relationship we're in is. So I came to the marriage as a spiritual person, and he came to the marriage as a religious person. So that was a very interesting, and for a very long time I was walking down this path of being a religious person because I was being a good wife, and that's what he wanted. And I would stand in this congregation of people and think, I don't feel anything. I'm feeling completely numb. And my end game is feeling. I'm a feeler. I'm emotional. So eventually I was able to step up and say, this isn't going to work for me. And you're welcome to do that with the kids, and I'll help you get there. If I have to iron clothes and get them up early and do whatever to get to church, I will do that for you. But that's not my space. So I came as a pretty spiritual person in many ways. I mean, he's from Pennsylvania, where they farm, and I was a vegetarian, and I had all these thoughts about that, and I kind of showed up in his life, God bless him, as this woman that had all these other ideas, and so I think I'm at a place where I've evolved quite a bit now, but it was always there. Yeah. But that's a smart question. We just had it on Easter. We just had that, experience because the religious stories are so important to him, and he wants to. And how do you represent that authentically when that's different from maybe the path you're walking, but you want to honor the person you're in relationship with? And so,
how?
Yeah.
Yeah. How?
Yeah. It came up, and I can't say we have found that perfectly. I will say that we have really honest, our kids are 19, 17, and 15, and so we have really honest conversations with them, and they know that probably would be what I would represent. But what they're learning in all of that is that when you're in partnership with someone else, you do honor and respect what they want. So we're coming at it from that point of view. I can't say it's perfect yet.
Yeah. I have a similar thing going on with my husband in that I suppose I kind of stepped into our relationship very similar in thinking to him, which was more kind of atheist. We don't believe in God. Mm-hmm. And now I love God. My God. I'm universal energy. And and so we've had a big transition into actually going from being really having similar foundational beliefs to quite different. And that's interesting as well when you have those conversations with the kids about God or
right.
beliefs.
It's interesting what you say. So you believe in a structured God, because what I've come to know too is that I started a marriage thinking that God was this person that showed up at church, but he really shows up, or she really shows up in so many different ways and places. And so are you saying that you believe in a structured religion?
I'm not sure what. No structured religion. No.
So similar to what I'm saying,
yes,
that
yes.
God just is everywhere.
God is everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know, there's faith. There's a lot of faith involved with that I am trying to instill into my kids. You know, it's like believe, trust, all of that stuff that we have some interesting conversations around.
And isn't that fertile ground for exactly what marriage is?
Exactly.
Faith and trust.
Yes.
Believing, because relationship really is an entity. It's an invisible thing, much like God, that is living between you and another person. And so when you get into the rough patches that you talked about earlier, you know, you need to let God show up in that way.
Yeah. And that's interesting you say that. I often see relationship as the kind of the fire between the two of you that you need to tend to, like a hearth or hearth, or however you pronounce that word. You know, and if it's down to just embers, you really need to fuel it with a few logs. And if it's raging, you probably need to, you know, take a few off.
Right. That's very true. It's true. And I think that sometimes we do forget that a relationship is a living, breathing thing. It's a container, but it's also a living, breathing thing that you have to care for. Sure.
So how do you care for yours?
Well, you know, I have really started to be able to get a little bit more quiet about his different ways and being okay with his different ways and not seeing our differences as something that's breaking us apart and making us not relating. It's just
I just feel your words there as medicine. And to women everywhere. I love it. I love it. Okay. So I just want to repeat that. Your differences do not necessarily need to be seen as something that's breaking you apart.
No. No. I'm going to go back again to your interview where she was talking about how men show up in relationship. And I thought it was so beautiful and so true. And I think to expect a man to show up in a way that you show up in a relationship is it's unfair. And I think it's best to allow them to show up in the way they want to show up so that you can have a chance to understand. Yeah.
And it actually, there's evolution in that, isn't there? In the expansion of being able to receive love that wasn't how you expected it, that wasn't exactly precisely how you wrote the script for it. Like you actually have to burst your heart open in order to receive it.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I have a very specific moment in my life where I finally was like dropped in and I got that. I was in the shower and I can remember sort of just, you know, doing my thing and having this moment where I realized that love shows up differently from whoever is offering it, because they are defining it that way. And, you know, if you truly want love, you have to honor and respect what's given to you. And so you're right. It may not always look exactly like you think it's going to look, but to really believe in someone and their intention in whatever they're offering you, then it has a chance to show up.
And there's trust and faith that goes into believing in someone and their intention for you, I think. Especially when you think love should look differently. Like I think there's a gap there between what you think it should look like, their intention, but your faith, like that's where God has to show up in a way. But it's also where your belief in your lovability, in your worth, has to show up.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. All those moments that you're resisting, and resistance is such a quiet thing that can show up in a relationship that really can tear it down in a way. All those moments where you're resisting, why am I resisting? That's one thing I'm really playing with right now in all of my relationships. I sort of a side note, I was with a friend over the weekend, and her ex-partner, she's gay, her ex-partner, they're trying to still negotiate some type of relationship, and the ex-partner's having trouble with that. But my friend is just sitting and offering love to her, constantly offering love to her, so that she has somewhere to come back to, so that she can sort of understand deeper the road that they're walking together, while still also loving herself. Because it's true, there is sort of a balance between loving yourself and receiving and loving another. And I have to be honest, there was times where I was listening to my friend where I said, well, she's just behaving in ways I don't know that I could put up with that. And she's like, it's okay. I understand how to bend. It's okay. And I know that I'm not being hurt, and I can make a choice around that. And it's really kind of beautiful to watch another person offer that type of love to someone else. Yeah.
Oh, I think in that little story, there is so much that I feel it speaks to the secret of being able to find that love long term.
Yeah, because, the interesting thing that she does is she sits with her uncomfortable emotions, and she looks for the place where she can love her ex-partner again. So she just goes through this cycle over and over again, where if something happens where the ex-partner kind of acts out a little bit, she's very clear, I want to leave this person better than I left her, and I want to be in a relationship with this person in a way that makes them feel honored. And I don't have any expectations of what the future will bring. I just know what my intention is in this exchange. And that's what she does. She sits, and I don't know that she always gets it perfect, but she has the courage to sit with the difficult parts and to come back to the ex-partner only when she knows what is the most loving about her in that moment. And that there's something about that discipline and that practice that is really quite beautiful.
And generosity, I think. The generosity of spirit to show up in that love. Yeah. I'm wondering if you can speak to us about perfection in relationship. It's just a word you've said, it's definitely not perfect. You've said that a couple of times. And wouldn't you say relationships are imperfect beasts?
Oh, by absolute design, because I don't think we learn a ton about ourselves in perfection. And I think that there's something about imperfection that we creates more bigness in us, because we have to stretch when we are uncomfortable. But I also think that imperfection is what helps us learn about others, acceptance of others. Yeah, and I don't think there's ever a perfect, no, never, no.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to try and keep this, really not too long. So I just have one, maybe two more questions. Sure. I would love for you to give us a crack at the advice you would give for your younger self. Maybe the woman who is about to get married.
Okay. So I'm going to be really human here. I just hit something on my computer. Can you see me okay?
Yes.
Okay. What would I say to my younger self? Listen more. I think listen more and be more willing to allow someone else to have their truth. And you don't have to solve everything right in the moment. Like a long-term relationship, there isn't an end game to any of these conversations. And I think that they constantly evolve as you evolve. And I think who you are when you're young and entering marriage is so different than who you are as you get more life experience and you travel along next to someone else. So I think that's what I would say to myself is listen more and allow him to have his truth more. Yeah. It doesn't mean you're not having your own if you allow someone else to have theirs.
Ah, beautiful. Doesn't mean you're not having your own if you allow someone to have their truth. I love that. Because that's probably where a lot of the resistance comes from, doesn't it? It's like if I let him have that truth, that means my truth is overwritten, or deplete.
Yeah, and I have to tell you one thing too that just came up for me while you were saying that I think has been such an important learning lesson for me. I'm 50 now, as I enter into my 50s, is that sometimes people don't speak what they're understanding. Sometimes they actually have more going on within than you understand, and it doesn't mean that just because a conversation's ended in one way that they haven't gone off and had some other thoughts about it. And they may not tell you what those thoughts are, but they may come back and interact with you in a way that, gets you closer to where you want to be.
Beautiful. And one last thing, Jillian. Sure. What is your intention as you set out into the future with your relationship?
So I know about the messy bits in myself. And so I use my relationships to polish those places up. Oh. So my intention is to own who I am, the good and the bad, and to work on the bad so that the good's able to shine a little bit brighter. To really own the bad and look at it. Yeah.
And by working on it, that's what you mean, owning it and looking at it.
Right. I think sometimes it's easy to point the finger at the other person, but we create through energy. And so anytime you step into a situation with someone, whatever your thoughts are, wherever you've come from and whatever you brought with you in that experience through emotion, you're creating with. So I guess just attuning to that piece and then attuning to the parts of me that I know need to be polished up. They may not be in this lifetime, but I'm working on it.
Maybe next lifetime.
God, there'll be more. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today.
Yeah.
So lovely to connect with you.
You too. Thank you for inviting me.